All right, and we're back in the studio with one more interview for tonight's show, and we're going to go to London, England, where people in the UK have been dealing with the pandemic, and one former Regina resident is in the middle of that as well, and gave us a little tour.
This is my favorite urban park to come and chill in Canary Wharf, and they've drawn bubbles that you can sit in to keep everyone socially distanced.
The United Kingdom is struggling to bring those COVID numbers under control, so we're connecting with Mark Henry. He's from Regina and has lived in London for 7 years. He's a graduate of the University of Regina's education program and now teaches primary school in London. And Mark Henry joins us from London, England. Hi there, Mark.
Hi, Costa.
You were so kind to do a little bit of a tour of London for us, as life as it is even today in this pandemic world. So let's take a look.
So I'm in southwest London right now. It's a little more suburban than where I live. And this is a real trend around here is lots of businesses have just expanded onto the streets, and the streets have been closed off to traffic, which has angered a lot of people, but also made a lot of people happy. Use public transit to get to work most days. It has been a reduced service for a lot of it, and a lot of these trains have been really empty, but now they're running closer to what they would have been before with obvious social distance measures put in. So this is Canada Place. It's one of two shopping centres in Canary Wharf, which is one of the central business districts in London. During the initial stages of lockdown, this place was empty. This is like my local, there's a few big grocery stores here. This is my local place that I come do my food shopping. And there would be, besides the grocery store, which is also very empty, there was no one here. All of these businesses were closed and have only started to reopen in the last month or so. This is a little less busy than it would be on a regular Sunday, but still pretty busy.
Well, Mark, you're quite a tour guide. Thank you for giving us a glimpse of life in London right now. What has this pandemic meant to you living in one of the most vibrant cities in the world?
It's been really interesting. I think, obviously, globally, we've not really experienced anything like this in our lifetime. So it's really fascinating to see a city of 8 million people that swells to 10 million every single day, with computers just reduced to just kind of strangers walking around. And, it's been really different. It's been really kind of a ghost town in a lot of ways.
So what was it like, though, during the height of the restrictions in London? What was life for you like at that time?
It's odd just how quickly you kind of got used to it. What used to be, dozens and hundreds of people around you at any given point on the street or in a shopping center or on the subway, there might be just a handful of people really spread out. There's a real kind of eerie sense that kind of just permeated everything. I worked throughout because I'm a worker, so I was traveling in a big chunk of the time to my job, and you definitely felt very different and very alone in a lot of ways. It was just like nothing I've ever felt before. It was very surreal to be in a city that used to be very overcrowded and very, very populated, reduced to really quiet and really empty.
Well, Mark, as you probably know by keeping in touch with Saskatchewan, that if there are even just 1 or 2 cases reported in Regina, people start to cringe, they get worried, they talk about it. You're in one of the COVID hotspots in the world. What has that been like living there for you?
It's been, like I said before, it's a bit surreal. There are moments of real stress. When I started having to go back into work, commuting was a real concern. We all, London also, the UK acted really slowly at the start of this, so we ran out of things like hand sanitizer quite quickly. We couldn't get masks right away. So there was a real kind of like, what am I going to do every day to make sure that I'm protecting myself? Luckily, at the start, a lot of people did stay home. We were really fortunate that people took that advice and stayed home and gave space. But yeah, it was really stressful at the start. And as obviously as we move further into it, it becomes more normal and we start to get more relaxed. I'm a bit grateful for having to go to work because I think the stress that I felt at the start, other people are starting to experience now that they start to enter into the world again.
Well, you're a school teacher. You teach elementary school children. What's the biggest worry that you have about going back into the classroom?
I mean, things like anyone, I think, there's lots of conflicting arguments that, children aren't likely to be big spreaders of it. Other people say they're really big spreaders, but I think it's, that kind of network that I work in a really large school. I work in a great building and I really feel cared for by not only my council that runs the school, but my coworkers and my head teachers have done a wonderful job making sure we're safe and haven't put any pressure on us to come into work if we don't feel safe. But I think the big concern is the network that, in a school of 500 or 600, there might be 300 or 400 families then who might have siblings in other schools or in other ways that people are connected. So I think the kind of closeness of how people are and how things can get passed is probably my biggest concern.
The government there, the Boris Johnson government has come under a lot of pressure, I should say even criticism, severe criticism on how it's handled this pandemic. What do you think of the way the government's handling it there?
It has, they've done some really wonderful things and they've done some things in a really, really bad way. I think we acted far too slowly. We were one of the slowest, or we were one of the last nations in Europe to lock down. So that obviously had huge repercussions. I think, looking back at the lack of PPE for our healthcare workers especially has been really tragic. Our numbers of deaths is, I think, the highest in Europe, if not one of the highest. So I think that, not that that's all government fault, but I think at the start of it, not acting quick enough, not being decisive enough. And fair enough, it's a tough call to make. I certainly don't envy Mr. Johnson's position.
So that's from where you sit in London. What are your thoughts on the way this thing has been handled in Saskatchewan?
I haven't been following it too closely. I keep in touch with my parents and some friends. These are the moments where I really envy not living in a very populated place when I've been cooped up in a small apartment for a good chunk of this with two other people. I would have really liked to have had some green space, but I think, from what I've heard, Saskatchewan has done a fairly good job in handling this, and I'm really sorry. I don't really have a lot to say about it.
Well, you do want to stay in London, I understand. You want to be a permanent resident there. Is that correct?
Yeah, my residency or my visa expires next month, so I'm applying for permanent residency next month. So the last maybe 4.5 months weren't the ideal way to have a visa tick away, but I guess that's kind of life, and I'm grateful that I'm still healthy and haven't been impacted by COVID in any kind of physical or safety way.
Well, it's a vibrant city.
But yes, my plan is.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it's a vibrant city, not as vibrant as it used to be, but I'm sure it'll get back to where it was. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.